Hi friends, my name is Rachel Hall and I help teachers set up and maintain the literacy stations in their classrooms. I'm the face behind Teaching Firsties and Literacy Stations Made Easy, which is an online membership for teachers that gives them a library of resources for the literacy stations in their classroom, and I'm going to tell you more about that at the end of this video. It's an amazing program, so I hope you'll be interested in joining. I am actually videotaping this because of the light. I'm at my father-in-law's house. I'm obviously not in Indiana because there's an orange tree right there and palm trees everywhere. So this is like my Southwest studio. So we're visiting my father-in-law for Christmas. So this is actually pre-recorded right by his pool. And I'm honestly hoping that, I mean, the pool is like 3 feet that way. So my setup here for the light and everything was a little daunting because I'm seriously afraid my laptop's going to like tip into the pool. So fingers crossed it does not. But today what I want to talk to you about is independent reading groups and how to set them up. So what you'll need while you watch this video is the free Literacy Stations Planner, which you can get in the descriptions and the comments of this video. So go ahead and download it while the video is playing in the background. If you're watching this live on Facebook, you might want to re-watch it and fill it out as we go. But I'm going to upload this to YouTube as well. So make sure that you have the planner with you so you can make notes as you go. So it's currently January here, it's winter break, and when you return to school, it'll be the perfect time to adjust your guided reading or your literacy station groups. So even if you're returning to virtual learning where you might have your groups meeting on a breakout room for Zoom or Google Meet, you'll still want to just adjust them a little bit. Or if you're watching this later on, sorry, huge truck going by right there. If you're watching this later on in the year, it's never too late to look at your independent reading groups at your literacy stations and make sure that you're maximizing the full potential of your students. So I've been teaching for 22 years with 16 of those in first grade. And at the beginning, I really struggled with my independent groups, and I didn't know what changes to make. I didn't know how to fix it. And it wasn't really until I started planning backward that my literacy stations began to run like clockwork. Before, all I did was I kind of planned the content and I planned the materials, and once I had all my stations set up, then I started thinking about my students and I kind of sprinkled them in semi-randomly to my stations, thinking that would work. And of course it didn't, like at all. So it wasn't until I looked at my students first and planned with them in mind first and my content and materials second that my literacy stations began to run like clockwork. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's start with the overall reading levels of your class. You know your students better than anyone. You know the mixture of them. You know which of your kiddos need remediation or enrichment. I'm sure you've had all the kinds of years where your students are either on the low side or the high side or a mixture of all of it. And I found the last years that I had a wide range of abilities and found that to be more difficult to make independent reading groups because my students needed such different things. But it can be done, and I'm going to talk you through some of the things to consider as you group your students. So you're going to begin with your students in mind. Start thinking what your students need the most. Do you see a need for more remediation during their reading groups? Which students need to be challenged? Do you have students who prefer to work independently instead of with a partner or a group? These are all things to consider when you're forming your independent groups. So start by jotting down some of the names of students who might have some of these needs. I used to use sticky notes, but found that was difficult after a while. My whole desk was covered with sticky notes, and it was just too confusing. So even I, like a lover of sticky notes, needed a little bit more organization. So now I use this page on the literacy planner, or I can either digitally or physically write out some notes for my students, and this is in your the download. So this and the next page is where you can jot down your notes. Now you can either print this and use it pen and paper, or you can type into the boxes into the onto the PDF, or you can do it in Google Slides. So it is up to you. Your independent reading groups shouldn't be one size fits all. They're meant to be flexible. And you might have a combination of large and small groups with varying abilities. Some groups had students who had the same ability and some might vary. You might have a student who needs help with tasks like logging on or remembering where materials are kept. If this is the case, make a note of that and make sure that he or she is in a group with a helpful buddy. On the other hand, you might have students who are frustrated with the task of helping others, so I would make sure that they are in a group of kiddos with approximately the same ability. You're going to really kind of hone in and get to know your kids as you go through this process. You're also going to want to consider student behavior. And I'm going to talk to you about Literacy Station's expectations in another video, but in the meantime, know which of your students can work together successfully and which ones probably cannot work together. So when I was in high school, this is a good example of this. I had my mom as a math teacher. She taught calculus, and so my best friend and I were actually in her class. And on the first day, my best friend's name is Kara. She let Kara and I sit by each other, which was, I don't know why she decided that was a good idea, because what do you think we did? We talked all the time. And then at the dinner table was this really awkward conversation of, you shouldn't talk in your class. And I'm like, well, don't sit us next to each other. It's like a no-brainer. You know, Kara and I were inseparable. So the next day, Mom separated us and it was back to business, clearly. So you know who your Rachels and your Karas are. So, jot down on your notes who can work together and who cannot. You also know which students on the opposite end of the spectrum will bicker or argue over materials or shared things that things they need to share, shared materials. So you're going to need to make a note of that too. And you know which students like to work alone and which ones need somebody to motivate them to finish a task. So those are all the notes that you can make in this section. Now, my school was a Title I school, and students were pulled for reading services during my independent reading groups, which was fine if they were working independently, but I also wanted to pull them for a guided reading group. So I really kind of needed to map out who was being pulled and from where. So which students are being pulled? Are they going to leave gaps in a reading group where a partner was necessary? And are you going, when you pull your kids, are you going to pull an entire group or are you going to pull from separate groups, making sure that you're not leaving a gap with, if you've got a partner group and you pull one child away, what is the other child going to do? Are they going to leave a gap because now you have a problem with a student who doesn't have a task? So these are all things you have to consider. I actually do break out my sticky notes for this kind of to map out. I almost want to write my name on each, not my name, my students' names on each sticky note and then pull them and just kind of move them around as if they were actually moving, students moving throughout my room, just to make sure that I solved all those problems ahead of time. I wanted to kind of mimic the movement of my groups, and it helps me anticipate a problem that I might have later. Because the last thing you're going to want is to try to get a guided reading lesson going and find out you left a hole somewhere and now you have a student that does not have a task to do. But remember though, all of these strategies are not necessary to set in concrete right away. Your independent reading groups should be fluid. You want to revisit this as often as you can. You're going to see your students' needs change and your groups are going to need to change as well. I tried to look over my groups about once a month to see if I needed to make any adjustments or move some children around. If I needed to maybe make a complete overhaul, I would spend a little bit more time on it. Sometimes I would just maybe move one or two students around. But it is meant to be flexible. So make sure that you are coming to this. It is a pain. It is like a jigsaw puzzle, but make sure you're coming to it as your students are the most important. So it's important to begin with their needs in mind instead of your content, because this will make your groups run so much smoother in the end. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I offer to make your literacy stations run smoothly. So I have Literacy Stations Made Easy, and it is a teacher membership, and it's a library of resources that you will have available to you to save time and energy on your lesson planning. So you'll be able to log into the membership and download what you need for your students. And both the digital and the traditional resources are available, so whether you're teaching virtually or in person, you'll have everything you'll have access to everything you need. So the membership is going to open on January 12th, and you're going to see more information as it's coming. I'm going to be sharing a lot more about it, but I want you to stick with me because I really think that this is something that teachers will need, especially K-2 teachers who are just trying to get by with all this virtual learning. And so I really hope you stick with me on this. So I hope this was helpful to you. Make sure you're beginning your literacy stations with your students in mind, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.